All right, you mentioned the Commanders and that they do have that second pick. Danny, what do you think Washington should do with it?
I think they should take Drake May, the quarterback out of North Carolina, and build around him. And there is some debate around who the second best quarterback is. Some people even, tried to recently make the case that Jayden Williams could be the best available. I just look at Drake May, and I've been covering him for a couple years now, and I remember the first time I saw him do is he was playing against App State. I think it was his second start, and I'm watching just the innate ability to kind of go within the pocket, to be able to move, and to be able to make plays, and just the instincts, the quarterback instincts, working within the pocket, moving up in the pocket, making every throw you needed to make, and he wasn't working with that much talent around him. I think that's, to me, is the difference. Jayden Daniels is phenomenal. I think he's made a really good quarterback, but he also had two probably first-round picks he was throwing to this past season when Drake May was throwing to kind of a bunch of scrubs there in Chapel Hill and able to still put up some pretty decent numbers there for the Tar Heels. So I like Drake May a lot, but I do think it's a pretty interesting debate between him and Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, DK, we're on opposite sides of the fence here, because if you're the Commanders, I kind of talked about this earlier, Jenny, that people would think that they maybe flirt with trading up to #1 because Cliff Kingsbury is their OC and he was with Caleb Williams at USC. But to me, Jayden Daniels is the pick. You talk about what he can do, not only from within the pocket, but outside of the pocket. You brought up a really good point. You talked about what he had weapons on the outside, potentially 2 first-round picks. Did people have that same smoke for Joe Burrow when he went #1 overall? And if you look at the trajectory, right, Joe Burrow coming into his senior year was probably a 6th or 7th round draft pick. Same thing for Jayden Daniels, right? Probably a 6th or 7th round draft pick, really developed and honed in, got better every year. And as a quarterback, if you're a team, that's what you want to see. Your quarterback develop and get better every single year. And if you put Joe Burrow's numbers up from senior year to Jayden Daniels, and we talked about this throughout the whole year on the college football show, like his numbers were astronomical. Yes, he had talented receivers on the outside, but let's not also forget, DK, he had one of the worst defenses in all of football, so he literally had to go out there and put up like 50 points a game for them to even have a chance to win. So if you're the Commanders, right, to me, just breaking down the film, Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels, it's not that much big of a difference. Why give up draft capital? You got a lot of money that you can spend in the offseason and free agency to put weapons around him. You also brought a defensive-minded coach in to really help that defense. Jayden Daniels is the pick at #2.
I like Drake May. I don't like him going 2. I side with Leger when it comes to Drake May or Jayden Daniels, and here's why. Jayden Daniels was the best quarterback in college football a year ago. No debate, no argument. Of course, he won the Heisman. You talked about everything he had to put forth on displays every Saturday, week in and week out. I mean, he handled a lot on his plate, and he was able to do so easily when you look at his production. You talked about how bad his defense was, Leger. Think about this. Against Power 5 opponents, LSU defensively, they allowed 34 points on the scoreboard. So anytime they played against a Power 5 team, before they got out of the locker room, they already gave up 34 points. So it was imperative for Jayden Daniels to score points. They averaged around 45 points per ball game, not to mention what he did from the running aspect. I watched a lot of college football. I watched LSU a lot throughout my lifetime. I've never once seen a quarterback lead them in rushing, but that was Jayden Daniels a year ago. When you factor in the 2 potential first-round draft picks at the wide receiver spots that he had the luxury of throwing the football to, no one really knew who Brian Thomas was coming into this season, right? He surfaced because he had an outstanding passer throwing him the football. Malik Neighbors already had a name, but when you talk about Brian Thomas, I mean, I think in 2022 he only had around 300 yards or so receiving. He wasn't a big-time difference maker. That's the thing I like about quarterbacks. They have the ability to make the others that are surrounding them better, look better. We saw that with Joe Burrow. We saw the same thing with Jayden Daniels. And my last argument into why I like Jayden Daniels more so than Drake May going to Washington, Drake May wasn't even the best quarterback in the ACC last year. Think about that. Who does that remind you of? And I'm not comparing or saying they have the same trajectory at the quarterback position, but remember when Mitchell Trubisky went #2 overall, he was not the best quarterback in his conference. I don't know how you can explain taking a quarterback 2 who was the 2nd best player in his conference at his position. We saw this years ago with Trubisky. Deshaun Watson was the best guy. Trubisky goes 2. We saw how that played out for Chicago. If you're watching it, you got to really dissect the tape and understand what was put forth for both quarterbacks to survive and thrive and watch who did it best. It was Jayden Daniels.
Danny, any response to that one?
So it's hard to compare across. Are you going with Jordan Travis was the best quarterback in the ACC?
Yes.
So I agree, but I do think the system and the surroundings, because I don't think Jordan Travis's game translates to the next level, which is why his injury is going to hurt him as well. But I'll be curious to see where he gets drafted, if he does get drafted. I think it's a different comp. Like if you put Drake May in Florida State system, he might have put up better numbers than Jordan Travis did.
I'll say this, DK and Leger, when it comes to Washington, because they have so many issues, especially on the offensive line, seeing how much Sam Howell got sacked. Remember, he was the most sacked quarterback in the National Football League last year. Whoever you take at number 2, they better have the ability to create plays on their own. Jayden Daniels can do that because there might be a small improvement when it comes to protecting your passer, but 9 times out of 10, that quarterback is going to have to create plays on his own. We saw that from Jayden Daniels last year. Drake May is mobile, but he's not the athlete that Jayden Daniels is, not to mention being able to throw on the fly, play backyard football, whatever it's called, but be productive in doing so. As I mentioned, you talked about the numbers. This man threw for over 4,000 yards and ran for over 1,100 because he had to do so. Their defense was bad, and they had no other answer at the running back position.
Drake May's out here
The
throwing
tape doesn't
touchdowns.
lie.
Drake May's throwing touchdowns with his left hand, Jenny. Left hand. You don't need the wheels.
Without Josh Downs, Drake May's tape does not look as good this year when he didn't have Josh Downs.
Fair enough. Okay, so Drake May going 2nd overall to the Commanders. We got Jayden Daniels with BMAC and Leger going 2nd overall. We're going to move on now.